This is Monica Peters calling to order the March 2nd special meeting. And today we have with us Councilmember Patrick Harmon, Councilman Brett Moore, Councilman Tim Andrew, Councilman Chris Williams, and Councilman Michael Holmes. First, I would like to make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. All right, now we'll go to the presentation of items. The first item is 2026-52, fiscal year 2025 financial update. Staff will provide an update regarding the FY 2024-2025 audited financials. And today we have Bobby Fitzjohn, our Financial Services Director, and this is a presentation only. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, members of the City Council. This is an annual exercise where we bring you our audited financial results. I will say this year is later than normal. Usually we're coming to you in the fall. Due to the government shutdown last fall, a very important auditing document called the Compliance Supplement was delayed. Due to that delay, our state treasurer actually extended the deadline for audits to February 12th. And so our audit fell within that February 12th deadline. So we are on time, although we are later than we usually like to be. And we all want to be finished with last year a while ago. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to go through kind of some high-level numbers, but if you all have any questions or any concerns, please feel free to interrupt as we go through. So first off, we have general fund revenues in 25 and 24. I want to address a couple kind of accounting changes that happened during the year. Licenses and permits and taxes actually dropped a little from 24 to 25 because we moved the showroom tax and the occupancy tax out to a special revenue fund. And we did that because those funds and those revenues are restricted on what we can use them for. They're essentially passed through. They're not really up to your discretion on what you use them to fund city operations, like your other general fund revenues and expenses. So we moved those out to a special revenue fund, which led to a slight decrease in taxes and a slight decrease in licenses and permits. You'll see an overall increase in taxes, but that 2024 number had occupancy tax included in that. So all in, it's about a $4.8 million drop in revenues from 2024 to 2025 by making that adjustment. It's offset, of course, by some revenues increasing during the year.
So Bob, that means revenue is actually up 6 million, is that the math?
If you normalize 25 and if you normalize 24, you take that 4.8 out from the year before, it's about a 2% increase between the years.
Okay, thank you.
On the expenditure side, expenses look relatively stable. The same 4.8 million, right, can be adjusted out of 24 because it's a revenue and an expense. And so you see about a 1% increase overall in general fund expenditures. No major differences from year to year, except you see in community and economic development and culture and recreation. That's where the payments to the Market Authority and to the CVB or Visit High Point used to be. That's why you see the majority of that reduction. All right, this everybody's favorite topic is fund balance. So all in, fund balance increased by about 4.4 million. Most of that growth is tied up in non-spendable and restricted fund balance. So non-spendable, primarily in the general fund, is prepaids. We have a lot of leases and subscriptions that start on July 1st, and we have to send them their payments at the end of June. It leads to a little bit of our fund balance being tied up there. Restricted, that's where the majority of that increase is related to encumbrances. That's when we have a purchase order using 2024 budget that rolls into 2025 or 2025 budget that rolls into 2026. The most common reason for that increase in 2025 was actually fire trucks. So we've gotten to where we order an apparatus every year. That budget is in place and carries forward into the future, even if we have not received that truck and paid that invoice yet. And so that gets added into that restricted category. All in, your unassigned is what you're really interested in. That's what you have available to appropriate for future operations. It increased by about $1.6 million. In October, I believe, in the fall, we brought you all a fund balance appropriation of about $1.6 million for the SAFER grant and the replacement fire truck. So you can kind of see that strategy of what we add is kind of added during the year if needed. So we worked with management, even with preliminary numbers, to determine that $1.6 million-ish would be added in 2025. And then we were all able to appropriate that for the SAFER grant and the fire truck replacement in 26. Is there any questions on that? Okay, and then just a really high-level review of your enterprise funds. So this is your electric, water, sewer, stormwater, landfill, transit, and parking kind of all rolled together. You see about a 3% growth in overall revenues. On the expenditure side, it looks like expenses went down, but you can clearly see here power purchases, which we all kind of had signaled by our many meetings with electricities. We had a decrease in our expenses there. So you need to factor that into why our expenses dropped during the year. I'll also point out that amortization and depreciation has increased by about $2 million. That's how we expense our capital projects over time after they've been built or acquired. And so what that means is the capital investment that we're making is growing, and that number of how we expense that over time is growing as well. So it's just a reflection of that investment in a different way. Overall, it's like I said, it looks pretty flat, but a lot of that is just being offset by the decrease in wholesale power costs. Oh, sorry. Were there any questions on that?
No.
Okay. Dr. Harmon would like.
No. Processing.
Okay. The next slide is just how our cash and investments were sitting at year end. I do just want to say this is not a reflection of how they're invested during the year. It could very well be that we had a lot of maturities right around June last year, and so we ended up with more cash in the Capital Management Trust. Capital Management Trust, if you're not familiar, is essentially invested like a money market where we're earning about the treasury rate just on a daily basis and not locked into it over time. But that's where our cash kind of sits until we invest in longer term investments. Commercial paper, I'll just note, the LGC mid-year released some new guidance on that, where we're responsible for constantly checking in on the grade and credit rating of those commercial papers that we own. And it's, I think it's got a little bit better, but there was a lot of activity in commercial paper ratings, and we felt that the risk was probably too high during 2024, 2025. So that's just a decrease there. It's not to say we won't go back into that. We would just need to feel more comfortable with the latest LGC rulings on that. So overall, big number increase, right? 400 million from 327. I do want to note that 46 million of that were new bonds issued, so new cash came into the city for capital projects. We also had a $24 million distribution from the North Carolina Municipal Power Agency, NCMPA 1, Electricities. You all may remember that as that essentially the rebate that we'll be using to fund the construction of the Electric Operations Center. So out of this 400 million, about 172 million is restricted, most of that for capital projects. But yeah, the big increase is primarily issuing new bonds. So for 2026, we expect that to go back down to higher than this number, lower than that number.
How much of the 400 is obligated?
About 172 million is restricted, which means it's either in a capital project fund, it may be deposits, but it's not sitting there for operations. Additionally, about 41 million or so was our short-term accounts payable at year end. So that is just bills that hadn't been paid yet.
Yeah.
So you can kind of think about that as well. Capital assets, net of depreciation and amortization, just to show the continuous investment that we're making year after year. So net capital assets are going up. This construction in progress number are the projects that are currently in progress. But you can think about it like work in progress if you're on the private side. But these will eventually turn into capital assets once those projects are completed. That's just kind of the progress as of year end.
Bobby,
Yes.
Talk about intangible assets a little bit.
Sure. So intangible for the most part will eventually go away. There's some older capital leases, we used to call them, that might still be in there. But now lease accounting and subscription-based accounting has forced us into this new category called right-to-use assets. it basically means anytime we enter into a software agreement or a lease agreement, we have to analyze it, and it ends up becoming both an asset and a liability. And so now we have debt service where there used to not be debt service because it's technically a liability. So anyway, this will eventually kind of go away as far as what we use intangible assets for. I think some people, like if you capitalize like a website development, right, that might be a capital asset. So we usually wouldn't capitalize something that small. Our overall long-term liabilities. So you have your general obligation and limited obligation bonds. You can kind of think about this for the most part as your governmental debt. You have your revenue bonds that support your water and sewer investment. Notes, loan payables, leases, and installment purchases. Some of this can be like our fleet installment financings, but a lot of it is the leases and software agreements and things that we now have to treat as a liability. Compensated absences, we've talked about this before. That's like, it used to just be if you had to write a check for all of the accrued vacation liability that employees have at June 30th, that used to be what that is. Now we actually have to include sick leave and any other type of earned leave. So I know Councilman Andrews probably got last year's book up and he noticed this was only 8 million. We actually had to restate because now there's a sick leave component to it. So it was about 8 million before. I anticipate that 20 to 21 million probably being consistent with some growth because that number should always go up as wages go up and more people are hired, that sort of thing. But this is not a liability you actually have to write a check for tomorrow. It'll be paid out through salaries as the years go on. Similar to LEOSA, ELGERS, and OPEB, so LEOSA is our law enforcement special separation allowance, ELGERS is our local government retirement system liability, and then the other post-employment benefit liability. You can see that's stayed pretty consistent year to year, but that's another liability that is not like debt service where we won't write a check for it every year. It'll just be part of an employee's compensation over time. Landfill closure and post-closure liability. Essentially, we've opened up new cells. We're in process of closing other cells, so that's generally going to move up. But we are setting assets aside for that eventual closure costs and post-closure costs. Back up to revenue bonds, I do want to point out that we issued about 46 million this year, and then we issued about 6.8 million of limited obligation bonds. We also retire about 20 million a year between these two bonds. So just to give some context on the net impact of that. Any question on liabilities?
Is the retirement between the two lines about 50-50 or is it?
It honestly is.
It depends, is it?
Yeah, so right now it is. So I was surprised when I saw that, but it's about 10 million for revenue bonds. It's about 11 million for GO and limited obligation, but one of that 11 million is your stormwater. So it's an enterprise activity, but it was funded by general obligation bonds. But about 10 million governmental, about 11 million business enterprise. Last year I started showing just kind of a different way to look at debt with statistics that we already keep. These are statistics that are in the back of your comprehensive financial report. I just chose this one because last year I did debt per capita. So this is debt as a percentage of personal income. So that is personal income per capita. So it's like area of personal income and per person on average. And then it's our total debt. So it's not our debt service, but it's just a way to kind of show what it's doing over time. The last couple of years we've seen growth in personal income. That's been a nationwide trend. I don't think we're rising necessarily faster than anybody else, but nationwide we've seen that growth. And I think that's just kind of what you're seeing reflected here. Our debt's obviously not growing as fast as personal income is. And if you ever are interested in seeing more statistics, or if there's a ratio you're interested in, I'm always happy to throw it in there. I just try to pick something different. I don't get to do a lot of fun things, but this is one of them.
In your world, that's fun.
That's fun, yeah. I love a good graph. So in conclusion, the city has received an unmodified opinion, clean audit for the fiscal 25 financial statements. No findings were noted, and then no performance indicators, which are the sort of newly created measures that the local government commission uses. There were none of those noted. So you'll hear that tonight from our auditors when they present. They just don't get very much into the numbers. They just kind of do a high-level overview of the audit. So I want to make sure you all saw these and had an opportunity to ask me any questions. Everybody has one of these in their box, and so if you review it and you have any questions, I'm always happy to meet to go over that. Happy to answer any questions you all might have now.
Any questions?
I'll read that.
Yeah.
Okay, we're hearing no questions. We'll move on to item 2026-53, Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority Regionalization Study. And we have Damon Duquesne, our Assistant City Manager, and this is for presentation only.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council. Over the course of the last year and a half or so, staff has been in front of you to present either items related to our membership in Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority, PTRWA, such as the Advanced Treatment Project that's currently underway, or more recently about the regionalization studies and efforts regarding water and wastewater due to the growth in the Carolina core. So we felt like it was probably appropriate to bring some guests in, so you don't just have to take my word for it anymore. I feel like I've worn that welcome out. But I have Mr. Greg Flory, who's the Executive Director of the Piedmont Triad Regional Water Authority, and Mr. Darren Thomas of Raftellus are here to provide you with a presentation on study results that were just concluded regarding the regionalization effort, and I think a short update on where we are with the current project. So turn it over to Mr. Flory.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you for the invitation to come and talk about what we're up to down at the Water Authority. I'm gonna give a kind of quick briefing, just, you know, a little about us, how you ended up with us. We'll talk a little about the study, and Darren will get into a little more of the specifics on the financials. Darren's been working with us, Raftellus, on regionalization and a lot of the bond financing. Really, Raftellus has worked with us all along since we were formed, but he's been working hand in hand with us here for the past 2.5 years on a lot of this stuff. So let me see if I get the right button. All right. So what are we going to cover today? So we're going to cover a little bit about where we sit right now, some of the current focus that we've got going on and issues and challenges. I'm going to talk a little about the enhanced regionalization and master planning effort, and then we'll dial that into specifically how that concerns High Point, and then what we're looking at beyond today. So where do we sit right now? We were established all the way back in 1986. We are the existing regional authority in the region. Region being, when I talk about the region, I've tried to convince our board that we need to really, at this point, be thinking about the region as Guilford County and Randolph County and the citizens that make up that entire region, not just the member agencies, although the purpose certainly is there to serve the member agencies directly. We are solely a wholesale water treatment service provider at this point, but one aspect of that I'll note is all the way back in 1986 when we were originally chartered, we were chartered under 162A as both a water and wastewater provider. We've just only been doing water up until this point. We currently have 6 member agencies, governments, Greensboro, High Point, Randolph County, Archdale, Randleman, and Jamestown. All of them currently get some sort of water from us except for Randolph County. Randolph County actually does have 1.2 million gallons of finished water available. They just don't have a system to put it out and sell it to people at the moment. So they pay us for water that they're not currently using, and we're very grateful for that. We have 10 board of directors. The board of directors was formed based on percent ownership in the authority originally. That's how that was formulated. So High Point has 2 members on the board of directors. Greensboro, which is the largest member owner, has 3. And then some of our smaller owners like Archdale, Randleman, and Jamestown only have 1 on the board of directors. Some of our current focuses. So back in 24, as I mentioned, we have been doing water for a long time, all the way back to 86. That really was what the focus of the board of directors was all the way through 2024. Several times after I started, I did try and present to the board of directors the concept of reaching into other areas, but the timing didn't seem to be right. But a lot of the growth going on in that 23 period, we at the Water Authority, me in particular, was getting approached about a lot of the needs that were going to be coming to the region relative to water and wastewater, the growth around the Toyota mega site, the growth around the Wolfspeed mega site, Boom, Jet Zero, all of that. You know, everybody knows growth is coming. Utilities certainly have to be a part of that growth. And so we were getting pulled into more and more questions about, you know, how is this growth going to be addressed? And so in 24, in conjunction with some other aspects I'm going to mention in a minute, the board of directors initiated a strategic planning process. Coming out of that strategic plan, they identified several important priorities that kind of reshaped my focus, the organization's focus. And, you know, those three kind of key issues that they directed the organization to focus on were enhanced regionalization of water and wastewater resources. So how can the Water Authority work together with all of the members in that two-county region to try and find the best beneficial use for what is really a limited resource, to improve our community outreach and education. That's why I've been doing pretty much a year-long roadshow to member governments, and then improved infrastructure and service delivery. How can we help everybody optimize what's currently there and work to best serve everybody in that region? So what do we have going on right now? Some of our current issues and challenges that we're working on. We've currently got some capital programs underway. We awarded a design build contract for the expansion of the facility to 26.7 MTD and the construction of advanced treatment all the way back in June of 24. It's a several phase design build contract. The expansion is one phase of that, and the advanced treatment is a separate phase. The expansion to 26.7 is currently underway. We actually have ground moving out there. That 60% guaranteed maximum price number was awarded in October of 25, and it came in at about $84 million. Archdale, Greensboro, and Jamestown are the member governments that are participating in that, so that $84 million will be split amongst the three of them based on their percent participation. Currently, that's scheduled for completion in mid-28, assuming that no issues come up. The advanced treatment design is also ongoing. It's been going on concurrently with that expansion design. For the advanced treatment, reverse osmosis has been selected as the treatment methodology. That was selected really because it provides the most protection against the currently known and future unknown emerging contaminants. We did a lot of studies going all the way back. I mean, honestly, I've been studying emerging contaminants at the Water Authority since 2017. We studied a lot of different treatment technologies. Certain ones would work for certain things, but then they wouldn't work for other. And we have a lot of unique contaminants that we're dealing with. I assume most of you know that Eastside does discharge into our reservoir, and so that does present unique challenges. Currently, the advanced treatment is targeted for 2031 completion date. Really, the biggest challenge around that right now is that, so the way a reverse osmosis works is passes the water through some very tight membranes. It produces a concentrated waste stream that is then full of those emerging compounds that we then have to figure out how to get rid of or treat. And so that really is the biggest remaining challenge that we have to figure out is, all right, we've now got this concentrated stream of waste. What are we going to do with that? We have some options we're working on, but that is really the one outstanding item that we're still working through. When it comes to the advanced treatment, High Point will be responsible for approximately 19% of the cost for the first 12 million gallons of that advanced treatment. So in other words, you are participated in the original construction of the facility. That was for 12 MGD. We now have to provide advanced treatment on that 12 MGD. So you participated at 19% in the original construction. You'll participate in 19% of that advanced treatment cost. Current estimated numbers on advanced treatment are somewhere between 125 and 150 million. But that is an estimate as of right now. So other things we got going on, we're trying to elevate awareness via stakeholder engagement, kind of what I'm out doing right now about our master plan. We have built a new website. We've kind of renamed the website, triadncwater.gov. We're moving over to .gov website. And then we have this recently completed study that I'm going to get into in a lot more detail coming up very soon. So I mentioned with the strategic plan, everybody coming to me around development in the area. You know, what initiated a lot of that was you had in late 23, the legislature awarded Hazen and Sawyer, Friesen Nichols, Raftellus, Withers, and Ravenel a study to look at infrastructure throughout the entire 421 corridor. That's the Carolina Core. The state has identified that as a growth corridor. They've recognized that utilities are essential for that growth. And so late 23, they initiated this study. The study was put out in May and identified through that entire core over $10 billion in needs that could be needed to address the expected growth through the planning period. The map here actually is not breaking out that money. That is breaking out how money was allocated through ARPA funding in that Carolina core. That's what's shown in blue. So you'll see that, you know, the legislature and really throughout the entire state was awarding pockets of money to everybody. And what's also happening at the legislative level is that they're kind of getting sick of awarding these little pockets of money. They are focusing more and more on regionalization. That was the driver for this study. They had another study that was done this year looking at the hindrances to regionalization. So we are hearing out of the legislature that they want to see everybody working together, and so that's what initiated us to move on to looking at enhanced regionalization and master planning. We initiated our study, really, we had the 421 study come out, we did our strategic plan, and then late 24, I awarded a study to look at regionalization and master planning through Randolph and Guilford County to try and refine what was identified in the 421 study. So the goal of this study was to look at the entire 17 incorporated municipalities throughout Guilford and Randolph County, identify the needs through the 2050 planning cycle, come up with recommendations for the optimal infrastructure solutions, tell us what that financial impact would be to everybody. The 421 study did not go into it to that level of detail. And then to look at what some governance options would be on those recommendations. The study was, presented or was put out, not necessarily trying to identify the water authority as the solution, but we are the only regional entity in the area, and so that kind of is what came out of the study. If you go to our website, you will now see the finalized study is available. That is what is the cover page shown on the left there. The key outcomes of it are that, look, the existing capacity, interlocal agreements, and infrastructure are insufficient to meet the projected needs. and regulatory mandates for the entire two-county region. When we talk about regulatory mandates, what are we talking about? We're talking about some of the advanced treatment. We're also talking about nutrient requirements that are gonna be coming to the Deep River Basin in the near future. That certainly is something that could have a significant impact on East Side. There's also on the wastewater side, a lot of unknown regulatory future regarding emerging contaminants in that area, PFAS. And then there's challenges around biosolids. High Point currently has an incinerator, but I'm sure you all see a lot of bills around that quite frequently. And, that is certainly another challenge that we've tried to address in the report.
Before you go on, do you
Sure.
know, you mind going back? Do you
Yep.
know, you talk about the existing capacity is not enough. When you look out into the study, can you tell us what that needs to look like at this point?
What the capacity needs to look at?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the study digs very deeply into those numbers, and we've got them coming up in future slides, right? Yeah,
Okay.
we do.
All right.
Really, what one of the slides is gonna show is that if High Point just goes along with the go it alone scenario that you are currently under, and you're not, you work with everybody else, but if you stick with the current plans that you have, current population projections say that even expanding your facility, which would not be easy, honestly, we would, as the water authority, kind of probably have to have some concerns about that, I would say, because it would be coming into the reservoir. But in 2042, current projections are that you would run out of capacity, and you would not be able to have further growth past that. Now, look, they're projections.
Right, I got it.
But whether it's 2042 or 2052, at some point that is going to get hit. We had a lot of talk over the last year with a lot of the stakeholders about, are these numbers realistic? Where are you getting them from? We went back and refined them several times. There's still going to be questions about, whether you're going to hit it on a specific time frame. But if the growth that's projected shows up at some point, the numbers will hold true. So, if we just I touched on it already, but if we just maintain the status quo, what's gonna happen? Well, capacity constraints and development impacts, critical wastewater capacity restrictions will be hit in 2042. And that certainly could have a limit on residential and commercial development in key regional areas. Operational risks, independent utility expansions certainly cause fragmented investment and higher long-term operational risks. Working together, like I mentioned, the cost of expansion is at $100 million. Utilities are getting more and more expensive to operate, construct. It gets to a point that you almost have to work together just to be able to do it efficiently and effectively at a rate that.
Why is that? Why are efficiencies and technologies in that industry not bringing that cost down?
I think a lot of what's happening is, your financing hit on that a little bit. You've got wages that have been going up so much, so your wages in the construction industry have been climbing. Your cost for the parts and materials have been going up, and technological efficiencies on the operation side, yeah, there are some that you can implement, but on the construction side, it's people out there on the ground doing the work, and so, you have a very high installation cost, and now all of your costs to do it have been going up.
So is that possibly a combination of cost of labor and scarcity of labor? Does that factor into it?
Scarcity of labor probably factors in a little bit. I can tell you, our contractor, for instance, that's working on our project, they're based in Charlotte. When ICE was down in Charlotte, they had 100 workers call out sick because they were afraid to leave their homes. So, yeah, it is an impact. And, you know, the financial burdens and rate increases kind of touching on the costs, but then touching also on the General Assembly certainly has expressed fatigue with their continued singular investment to distress utilities, and they want to look for a more efficient, effective way to do it. And then lastly, like I said, you have the regulatory challenges, making it harder and harder for everybody individually to do this when we all are going to be faced with the same upgrades to meet the same criteria. You know, getting into the numbers a little more, this table kind of spells out some of those capacity questions that you had, and spells out what our master plan identified was 4 alternatives for working together at a regional facility, and then it spelled out, all right, if we don't work together, what is the go it alone solution? The key point to the go it alone solution is that by 2042, we are not going to have enough capacity in the region to continue growing. All of the other alternatives support growth past the 2050. The different alternatives here spell out, though, that look, it is going to take a lot of money no matter how we work together. Couple of
We
keynote.
got the highest MGD of the 14 MGD,
What's it? What's that one?
added wastewater capacity,
14.
that first box.
Yeah, so that is what it would add in the go it alone. And yes, High Point has the most available capacity to add at East Side if you can get it permitted. That's still a question. You have been told speculative limits, but there are certainly environmental groups that would fight an expansion of that permit.
Yeah.
So it would be a challenge. And the same really goes for Greensboro. Greensboro has been told they possibly can expand their TZO plant by 4 MGD, but that's it. They can't put any more wastewater in that stream that they're discharging in. And they probably will have a fight to get to 4 because currently the Haw River Jordan rules are being re-examined right now. So, you know, whether the numbers on the go it alone scenario are truly realistic, it is certainly a question, but to be a balanced study, we had to at least look at it. So you'll see, you know, there's 4 different alternatives spelled out. We've met together throughout this entire process. Everybody certainly agrees that alternative 4 really is probably the best solution because it minimizes the number of facilities that are being invested in. But for alternative 4 to move forward, it will require everybody working together, and by everybody, that means Randleman, Asheboro, Franklinville, and Ramp Sewer all agreeing to work together in partnership with the Water Authority. We will see if everybody can come to a consensus on that or not. That's part of why I'm currently on my roadshow. But on the dollar side, you know, you'll know on the water, it's a consistent number no matter how we work it. That's really because, look, we're already mostly regionalized on the water. The wastewater side, you know, a lot of different numbers there. 1.6 billion on the go it alone, all the way up to 3.1 billion on the alternative 4 working together. A lot of those costs get into, to build a regional facility, you have to get lines to bring it all together. And you kind of already work with some of that. You're working with that right now with Trinity, I'm sure, and them bringing their wastewater here. Darren's gonna talk a little more in detail about the numbers for you.
Will it work for me to talk from here? I'm kind of a loud voice person, so. Get the next slide. So,
Darren, we
yes.
need the mic for
They need
the
the mic.
audio.
Oh, because of online.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Thank you.
Okay, so essentially what these 2 slides show you is High Point situation relative to capacity on water and wastewater. And I'll just summarize it. You're in pretty good shape on water, based on the fact that you're with the authority, you're a big invested player with the authority, you have pretty decent water resources long-term, get you out into the 2050 and beyond. Where High Point is really limited is on the wastewater side, based on projected growth and so forth. So there's a sense of urgency to solve this wastewater puzzle, really for the biggest utilities in the region. It's High Point, it's Greensboro, and it's Asheboro. all three have a screaming wastewater capacity need and a compliance need based on the need to clean wastewater at higher levels now because of nutrient limits and emerging contaminants and so forth. And that's why in that slide previously you saw, it's a big number on the wastewater side, 3 billion-ish, something like that, up to almost, well, just 3.5 as opposed to 1.5 billion on the water side, okay?
And just real quick, 2034 is currently what is estimated to be the date that, High Point will hit capacity restrictions.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that, on a wastewater side, your capacity starts getting restricted when you get to certain percents of your available capacity. It's 80 and 90, and so that is some of that other buffer that's in there in that time frame.
Yeah, if you had a 10 million gallon a day wastewater plant, you got the 80% of that, everybody's breathing down your neck to get ready to build that next little amount of capacity. You can't do it just in time. You gotta stretch it out. I'm gonna give you a quick overview of what this means to High Point from a financial standpoint. Of course, detailed financial analysis and cost of service studies. You just had a great presentation on the overall city's finance, health and well-being. I'm gonna talk specifically about water, wastewater. So what you see in this analysis that's been done as a part of the regional studies, we just tried to analyze what the rate impacts to a typical customer that would buy, say, 5,000 gallons of water on a monthly basis would be. And so you see most of the data that's being presented within the body of this report really kind of looks at that. I look at my water bill. I live over south of Greensboro. I'm not in the city, but I have water and wastewater utility services from Greensboro. My wife and I are the only two home now. We don't use 5,000 gallons of water on a monthly basis. My guess is when everybody was home, we might not use that amount of money. And so the reality is you can just look across here and see what a typical well, this is not the one I was looking for. This is actually to show you what the rate impacts would be on a typical water and sewer bill to a customer using 5,000 gallons a month in any one of these jurisdictions if they went it alone. And remember, we just said going it alone isn't a feasible solution for High Point or Greensboro for that matter. So that's $298 for High Point right now. You're at about 101 currently.
Why is Greensboro so much less?
Because their utility is twice the size of us. They have 110,000 connections. We have about 50,000, something like that. So they spread that cost over, they can spread that cost over twice as many customers. And that's pretty much the case. When you get to these smaller communities that have 1,200 connections, boy, their unit cost is really high, okay? So the basis of the analysis is really to try to say, well, what does it look like if you project out to 2050? Forward is just
Is that $2050 or today's dollar?
2050. Yeah, everything's been escalated in the financial model. Okay, so the other reason, and back to what Greg said relative to the state of North Carolina, the General Assembly, they've been giving a lot of money out to a lot of utilities for a long time. Smaller communities, and we don't usually get a lot in High Point. We don't usually get a lot in the bigger municipalities, but the smaller ones, generally speaking, they've got a lot of support. There's a lot of fatigue within the General Assembly, and they basically have said that. Can we give money to a more regionalized future in order to support the building of this very expensive infrastructure, as opposed to giving so much money to so many small communities scattered out? So that study that was done, that previous study where we looked at Carolina Core, that was really done. The ask was, what would it take to regionalize this area so where people are working, we don't have so many different utilities, right? And so the reality is what we did is we analyzed the long-term financial impacts to all of the rate players if we did every capital project that was identified in that study. And for us, and without support, that's an important point, because we've also identified what we think outside support, state, federal assistance would need to look like to keep rates reasonable out in the future. Because if you're living here, those are not reasonable rates, right? Or here, and maybe here. They're still big. They're big for everybody in here. But keep in mind, when you take where you're at and you project it out 25 plus years, this right now represents about a 5.5% annual increase for High Point between now and 2050, every single year. So then we said, hey, we need financial support, so rates aren't so crushing to the typical homeowner. And this here, you can go in the report and look at it, but basically, what we said is if alternative 4 is selected, the total price tag between water and wastewater, I think was around 4 billion, is that four?
4.5.
Yeah, $4.5 billion. If we can get $1.1 billion in support, we can keep rates more reasonable as we look down the road forecasting into 2050, okay? For High Point, this represents about something less than 5% annual rate increase between now and when we get to 2050 to fund that level of capital as long as we get that support. If we don't get that support, that number goes up. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's also data that's subsumed inside this report. So think about it this way. When the dust settles and we're able to try to build a more regionalized future in the water wastewater space, these rates will be more realistic if we can get that support and we can work together. If we don't, you see what the impact's going to be to a lot of the folks. And the smaller communities are going to be the most affected. So the takeaway here is that enhanced regionalization, the way it's laid out in that plan, can address the capacity needs of the entire region between now and 2050, based on what we can see and based on the forecast. Outside funding support is going to be critical. And so the reason we're trying to hold this big coalition together, because if you have 2 counties and 22 municipal jurisdictions asking for support together, it's probably going to be more effective than 20 individual communities trying to ask for support individually, right? And so we're trying to hold it together to maximize support. His organization is perfectly positioned to actually try to pull this together because it is an existing water and wastewater authority created by North Carolina applicable laws, so we don't have to recreate anything. It's right there, can get into the wastewater business overnight. Timing is of the essence here. We've got we've got about 10 years. So we need to be looking forward with intentional force to start moving this forward because it takes, ask the engineers in the room, it takes 10 years to build stuff like this. And so we're about there where we got to get these relationships moving. We've got to be able to start making some decisions. Who's in? Can we hold the coalition together and so forth? I put this slide in here because I wanted to thank him and I wanted to thank Robbie and the staff and the city manager, everybody. They have been really, really engaged in this process, as have the other major utilities in the area, and they've done a wonderful job kind of getting us to this point. And it has definitely taken us a while to get to this point. Okay, so what's next? I'll let you give it back to Greg.
You're back to me. All right, so where are we going from here, you know? So in January, our board passed a resolution supporting the study, committing the implementation, you know, basically committing me to come out and try to get everybody to work together on regionalization, and identified alternative 4 as the preferred alternative. If alternative 4 cannot move forward, certainly we will step back to whichever one we can get everybody to work on. That is kind of what this resolution identifies. This resolution is also available on our website. So really over the next year, you know, that's what I will be trying to work on is pulling everybody together. A couple of notes kind of tying on to what Darren said. For the water authority to work together on the regionalization, all of our members will have to be on board with that. That will require unanimous support from our member government. So all of you need to be on board with it. So they would need to, staff would end up eventually presenting a revised joint governmental agreement to you all that would support whoever decides to come on board with wastewater. But first, what they are probably going to bring to you, and that probably will be within the next month, is a resolution similar to this, asking council to support moving forward on a regional wastewater solution. That is really the ask that we are making of interested parties at this point, and trying to dig into whatever else is required to try and get people on board signing up to move forward. So,
All right, thank you. Does, and for the matter of time, because we do have a closed session, are you just about done?
I am, I think I
Okay,
have
all
one
right.
more slide.
Okay.
Yeah, so at 26 and beyond, relative to regionalization, we're gonna be doing increased awareness, trying to figure out the participants, put agreements together, start on engineering, establish financing, and then start on the capital projects.
Perfect.
There you
okay.
go.
You may have any questions?
If one of the hopeful members declines, what happens?
Work with the ones we get.
I thought, okay, I misunderstood. I thought you said all 6 had to come on
Oh,
board.
so of our member governments, look, as of right now, all of the current members are intent on moving forward. Now, let's just say that somebody did not want to move forward. They don't necessarily have to participate in the wastewater side, they would just have to agree to the modifications of the joint governmental agreement. And so it might be that, look, it spells out, okay, it's moving forward, but Randleman isn't participating in it, and therefore, this is the way things are gonna be restructured. So, all 6 don't necessarily have to, it just agreement would have to be amenable to them in how it was revised.
But the agreement couldn't go forward if there was an objector who refused to ratify the agreement, correct?
Correct.
So when might council be asked to sort of commit financially to this process and issuing revenue bonds, I guess? Is that like
Yeah, I
next
mean,
year, 2 years from now?
finance inside, I mean, we are probably several years out on that, I would say. Because, like, there are some detailed PERs that are gonna have to be done to figure out how to most cost effectively bring everything together. Now, it is certainly probably more than likely what would happen is that whoever decided to get on board, there will be probably a membership dues component to fund some of that initial engineering, but that would really come probably out of an O&M side budget. I mean, we're talking small millions there versus, hundreds of millions.
All right, there's no other question. Thank you so much for that presentation.
Feel free, if anybody has any questions, reach out to me. Feel free to look through that study and just follow up.
Okay, we have one more item on here, 2026-54. It's a closed session for economic development. I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to go into closed session.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and Peter Bishop is our economic development director, and he will present. I like teamwork.